Welcome weirdlings, I'm Austin, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are delving into the world of 3D televisions. Riveting content that I'm sure that's going to capture everyone's interest. And I hope this video is popular with the algorithm, because it's that interesting. Now, I shouldn't have to explain what a 3D TV is. But just in case, a 3D TV is a television that can display 3D visuals with or without the aid of special glasses. Yeah, most services became unavailable by 2017. I remember these things being at least somewhat popular 10 to 12 years ago during the whole 3D movie craze of the early 2010s. Late 2000s, early 2010s, I should say. Like, even a friend of mine's family owned one. I believe the thing that reminded me that 3D TVs existed was Knowledge Husk's video that he posted on February 27th, 2022. A couple months later, Linus Tech Tips also uploaded a retrospective on 3D TVs on May 24th, 2022. And I'm kind of surprised that neither Bright Sun Films or Company Man haven't made videos about it. This video is not on the Unusual Articles Wikipedia page. So, ooh, the baseball's coming right at me. Ah! Before delving into the history of 3D TVs, as the Wikipedia page does, I'm going to give a history on both 3D technology and television. So brace yourselves. So, 3D effects actually predate movies. The oldest known surviving film is the Round Hay Garden scene from 1888, and some of the basic components of 3D were developed in the 1830s. One of the most important developments to 3D technology was the stereoscope, which was developed by Charles Wheatstone. He developed it throughout the 1830s, but did not make it public until June 1838. And as you can see here, they are some binocular-esque spectacle type things. And how they would work is that there would be two photos or illustrations with ever so slight differences in perspective or set dressing. And since the thing rests only, millimeters from your face, you would see depth where you wouldn't otherwise. Similar to an old-timey Virtual Boy, which I am going to make a video on the Virtual Boy at some point. Another important development of the 1830s is the daguerreotype photograph, which was introduced in 1839. Something 60 years or so of camera and film development later. Sometime in the 1890s, The Guardian says it was sometime around 1894, British inventor William Friese Green filed a patent for a 3D movie experience that was just projecting film onto a stereoscope. On June 10th, 1915, at the Astor Theater in New York City, Edwin S. Porter and William E. Waddell, Waddell, presented tests to an audience using that famous red-green effect that would later be associated with 3D. And nothing really came of it, but the reels included footage of Niagara Falls. On September 27th, 1922, The Power of Love premiered at the Ambassador Hotel Theater in Los Angeles to an audience of people not associated with the theater or film, so the public. Both 2D and 3D versions of the film were made. Both are considered lost, and the 2D version is called Forbidden Lover. The Ambassador Hotel no longer exists and was replaced by the Los Angeles High School of Fine Arts, and I'm assuming they do not have a copy. 30 years of technology development later, and we are in the 1950s with the first true 3D movie fad. On November 26th, 1952, the movie Buona Devil was released. starring Robert Stack, Barbara Britton, and Nigel Bruce, and produced by Arch Obler. It had a budget of $323,000 and had a box office total of $5 million. It was also the first color 3D movie and was the movie to kick off what is known as the Golden Era. It also had the amazing tagline of "The miracle of the age, a lion in your lap, a lover in your arms." April 1953 saw the release of Columbia Pictures' Man in the Dark and Warner Bros. House of Wax, which debuted 2 days apart and were the first two movies to use stereo sound. And there was a small lull in the fad in mid to late 1953 before ramping up by December. This was mostly because of technical and or viewing purposes. And I feel like I have to mention this, but one of the movies released soon after the lull was a musical called Top Banana, which was released in January 1954 and is considered lost. Pretty soon after the lull ended, viewing 3D movies started to decline for good for the same reasons as the lull started, as well as a lot of theaters showing movies shot in 3D in 2D. Again, I feel like I have to mention something. One of these movies was Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Ocean man, take me by the hand, lead me to the land that you understand.
Not much happened between the decline in 1954 and the beginning of the second 3D movie fad in the early 1980s. The movie that kicked off the second fad was a spaghetti western called Comin' At Ya. Another movie that helped this fad blow up was Friday the 13th Part 3. And on the poster, it said Friday the 13th Part 3 3D. And right around the same time, other horror movie threequels were released and condensed to the Part 3 in 3D in the titles. So you would get, Amityville 3D and the infamous Jaws 3D. And on a side note, why were there more than one Amityville Horrors? I feel like a remake is fine, but why were there sequels? Okay, back on track. During this fad, 3D movies were also being made elsewhere, including the Malayalam movie, My Dear Kati Chethan. I know I mispronounced that. Malayalam speakers, go ahead and roast me. Between 1984 and 2003, 3D movies were pretty much only made for attractions at theme parks, and they were pretty much all IMAX movies because of the theme park experience. And one of these movies was called Captain EO, which was made by Francis Ford Coppola and starred Michael Jackson and was lost for a while. Yes, I am going to make a video for that, thanks for asking. And there was another resurgence in 3D movies starting in the early 2000s, and it's still kind of going on today. It peaked, in 2009 to about 2011. And it started with, of course, a James Cameron movie called Ghosts of the Abyss, which, from what I can tell, was a documentary about an expedition to the wreck of the Titanic with ROVs that Cameron was a part of. It was also the first full-length 3D IMAX movie filmed with the reality camera system. And weirdly, two other movies that used the same exact technology that came around at roughly the same time were Spy Kids 3D Game Over and The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. And if you watch either of those movies, you can tell that they were meant to be shown in 3D, especially the Spy Kids movie. Hey, it's editing Austin, and same day as as what you saw earlier. And I just want to say that another movie that uses this technology is a Jonas Brothers concert movie and a Spy Kids movie. The biggest movie ever created during this time was, Avatar in 2009. Not to be confused with The Last Airbender, which I hear is super accurate to the show. Nowadays, movies are still shown in 3D, but they're shown in a similar way to how they were in, 1954, where they're mostly shown in 2D. And before anybody asks, I've only seen one movie in 3D, and it was that one movie about the dolphin that didn't have a tail, and it was taken in by the San Diego Zoo, and Morgan Freeman was in it. And the downside of that experience was that it used the polarized sunglasses type of 3D glasses and technology, which we're getting into soon. And those sunglasses couldn't fit over my normal glasses, so I would either get the 3D experience, but it would be out of focus, or watch the movie without it being polarized. But we have to move on to the history of television, so now on to the history of television and the man credited with its invention. I warned you this video would be a long one. So let's get started with the man who invented the first fully electronic television set, Philo T. Farnsworth. Farnsworth was born on August 19th, 1906. In a cabin near Beaver, Utah, and was the eldest of the 5 children of Louis Edwin Farnsworth and Serena Amanda Bastian. He was a part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints throughout his life, and when he was 12 or so, his family moved to a relative's 240 acre or 97.1 hectare ranch near Rigby, Idaho, which, if we're going by modern roads, is about 400 miles or 643.7 kilometers away from Beaver. He was also excited when he heard that the home on the ranch was wired up for electricity. And since this was a ranch, he had to do ranch hand stuff. And it was while he was plowing a field row by row, he figured out that an image dissector could do something similar. Unsurprisingly, he excelled in science in high school. Editing Austin is back. And so this is the day after those other 2 intrusions you saw, and so he went here, Rigby High School, and I zoomed out. Then, right down the road, you have Farnsworth Middle School. Just thought that was interesting that they named a school after him in Rigby. There's Rigby right there. So also in Rigby, there's the Farnsworth TV and Pioneer Museum, which seems to be in the same building as the Jefferson County Museum. And if you get hungry, there's a Little Caesars right next door, along with a chicken place. And while still there, he asked one of his teachers at Rigby High School for advice on creating the all-electric television system. And in 1922, he produced a sketch similar in design to his final creation. In 1923, his family moved to Provo, Utah, where he attended Brigham Young High School for his senior year. And after he graduated, he enrolled in the Naval Academy, but was honorably discharged soon after to take care of his family because his dad died while he was attending Brigham Young High School. So he moved from the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, back to Provo, where he started attending BYU. And while attending BYU, he met his wife, Elma Gardner, who also went by the name Pem, and they married in 1926. They soon moved to Berkeley, California, and rented a house. From this house, he applied for his first television patent, but by the time it was granted on August 26, 1930, they had moved to San Francisco, and Philo had set up his lab at 202 Green Street. And it was in that lab on September 7th, 1927, that Farnsworth's image dissector camera tube transmitted its first image, a single horizontal line, to a receiver in another room. And according to Pem, after the first image was transmitted, Philo broke the silence by saying, "There you are, electronic television." He showed his creation to the press on September 3rd, 1928, and by 1929, or I should say in 1929, the technology had improved enough that an image of Pem could be transmitted. And just like YouTuber Hollywood Graveyard said, she can be considered the first television star. I should have said this before, but some people did make mechanical and electromechanical television sets before Philo, but he's credited with creating the first television. He only made one verifiable TV appearance in his lifetime, that being on the game show I've Got a Secret on July 3rd, 1957, where he was called Dr. X and won $80, which is the equivalent of $874.17 today. He also got a carton of Winston's.
Gee, we ought to do something, Fred. Okay? How's about taking a nap? Hey, I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break.
That's it! Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack.
Buster Keaton was also on that episode. Yes, I found the full original episode. He died on March 11th, 1971, at the age of 64 in Holiday, Utah, and is buried in Provo City Cemetery in Provo, Utah. And since then, there have been many improvements to the television and how we watch it. From analog bunny ears to satellite, from standard definition to 8K Ultra HD, from 10-inch black and white CRT screens to 82-inch OLED color screens. But most importantly, to today's video, 3D tech. Okay, history of 3D television. Now that we've explored the history of 3D technology and the electric television, we now have to talk about 3D television. Finally, it all started on August 10th, 1928, 11 months and 3 days after Philo first showcased his first electric television set, at least in his lab, when John Logie Bard demonstrated a stereoscopic 3D television system on his company premises at 133 Long Acre in London. One of the more major distinctions from Philo's system to John's system was that John's was electromechanical rather than fully electric. According to the Wikipedia page, the first 3D television was produced in 1935, and stereoscopic 3D still cameras for personal use had already become fairly common by the Second World War. But I could not verify either of those claims, so take it with a pinch of salt. Nonetheless, one verified fact is that in the 70s, Panasonic, then known as Matsushita Electric, was developing a 3D TV using an active shutter 3D system. I'll explain what that is soon. The TV was eventually released in 1981. During the same time Panasonic was creating this, they also collaborated with Sega to adapt the technology for the creation of the world's first 3D video game, which is called Sub Rock 3D, and was released in the spring of 1982. Not much happened in the world of 3D TVs until the late 2000s and the previously mentioned third wave of 3D movies. The two biggest reasons why TV manufacturers started producing 3D TVs and why people started to want them is because of Avatar and the 2010 CES trade show.
3D TV. Everyone's been talking about it for a while, but it has finally arrived. In April this year, LG, the Korean company, are going to start selling 3D televisions that you can watch in your own home.
According to Display Search, global shipments of 3D TVs reached 41.45 million units in 2012. And by 2016, the production of 3D TVs had essentially come to a standstill. I should say by the end of 2016. 3D TVs, much like 3D movies, utilize various methods to deliver a 3D effect. I'll begin with the previously mentioned active shutter system. As depicted in this GIF, active shutter glasses alternately block light in one eye while keeping the other eye wide open to light and switching eyes. One advantage of this system is the higher resolution. However, drawbacks include significantly higher costs for the TVs that employed this technology, as well as the need to recharge the glasses. And as somebody who has to wear glasses, I'm glad I don't have to charge mine. One of the most well-known versions of 3D is Anaglyph 3D, which is that famous red and blue style. Another popular method is polarization, which restricts the light waves reaching each eye. TVs employing these methods generally would cost less than those with the active shutter system, but suffer from lower resolution due to two pictures competing for the same amount of pixels, and even then those would still cost more than a normal HD TV at the time.
And even most HD TVs now.
And auto-stereoscopic displays, which, as the name implies, eliminate the need for special glasses. In a CTEC exhibition in 2011, Hitachi released a 3D projection system, which was auto-stereoscopic, that used a set of 24 projectors, lenses, and translucent half mirrors to superimpose 3D images on a horizontal viewing angle of 60 degrees and a vertical angle of 30 degrees. The cameras used for recording 3D are somewhat unique, as they need to capture two slightly different angles, and this photo right here perfectly shows the difference between a 3D camera and a normal camera. In sporting events, on-screen graphics often display depth that aren't usually there. However, a downside of live broadcasting with 3D TVs is increased need for computing power to generate graphics for the event. Now let's dive into specifics about TVs. As mentioned earlier, these TVs were quite pricey. What wasn't mentioned is that they were high-end and tended to boast features that most TVs didn't have back in the early 2010s, including internet connectivity. There were two types of 3D TVs, the 3D Ready TVs and the Foley 3D TVs. The 3D Ready type could operate in both 3D and 2D mode. These usually came with HDMI 1.4 support and a refresh rate of 140 Hertz. Philips was developing an auto stereoscopic 3D television set that would have been available for the consumer market by 2011, but was canceled due to the slow adoption of customers transitioning from 2D to 3D at the time. The Chinese company TCL Corporation manufactured a 42-inch LCD 3D TV, say that 5 times fast, that also used auto stereoscopy, and it was named the TD42F. And I don't think it's still for sale, but it originally sold for about 20 grand. Moving on to full 3D TV sets. They provide a 3D effect 100% of the time. Samsung and Panasonic both produced 3D TVs with a resolution of 1920 by 1080p with a refresh rate of 60 Hertz. And Toshiba pulled out all the stops by producing the 55ZL2, which featured a 3840 by 2160 display, and reviewers seem to give it a 3 or 4 star rating out of 5. In a review for Cygnet on April 5th, 2011, Steve May said, "In many ways, the Toshiba 55ZL2 is the future of television. So we have our fingers well and truly crossed that, unlike the 55ZL1, this set will actually make it to the UK. If it does, we will have a full review up as soon as we can." One of the major things that people complained about was the price. And according to the YouTube channel What Hi-Fi in 2012, the TV cost £7,000, which is the equivalent of £10,193 and 53 pence today. Okay, I always try to follow the format of the Wikipedia article, but for some reason the health effects section was placed at the very end of the article, so I decided to move it to a more reasonable spot for the video. There were health concerns, not only with 3D movies, but also with 3D in general. People claimed to suffer from headaches, eye strain, motion sickness, and seizures. Motion sickness being one of the most commonly attributed issues to 3D viewing. And according to the Daily Mail and iCareTrust.org, as much as 12% of Brits were physically unable to see the 3D effects on 3D TVs, at least with auto stereoscopy. Yeah, that was a short section. So is the next one. With the burgeoning popularity of 3D TV, there arose a need for standardization, as is with most things. The most official standard appears to be the DVB 3D TV specification. Again, say that 5 times fast. And according to this standard, TVs should be capable of connecting 3D Blu-ray players, gaming consoles, and HD set-top boxes for broadcasting 3D TV. Additionally, they should be able to receive a 3D TV broadcast directly via a built-in tuner and decoder. And that's all I have to say for this section, so on to the next one. This next section has 3 subsections on the Wikipedia page, and I just kind of truncated it for the sake of the video, but I do want to mention that in the subsection called 3D channels, it mentions that a local channel on the East Coast called MSG showed a Rangers versus Islanders game, limited coverage of the 2010 Masters tournament. Imagine watching golf in 3D, kind of a waste of the technology, and a Yankees versus Mariners game. And moving on to the shows. In February 1982, Television South broadcast an episode of The Real World in 3D, making it the first 3D broadcast in the UK. In 1985, the Portuguese channel RTP1 broadcast Creature from the Black Lagoon. The only interesting thing I found in the 90s is that there was an uptick in 3D TVs here in the States in May 1997, where ABC had a showcase of many of their shows, one of them being America's Funniest Home Videos. And the 2000s were pretty uninteresting, but that changed in 2010. On January 31st, 2010, Sky Sports broadcasted a soccer match between Manchester and Arsenal. On the same day, the Grammys showed a tribute to Michael Jackson in 3D. And on May 24th, 2010, the Aussie version of Fox Sports aired Australia's first 3D program, which was a soccer match between the Socceroos, which is the Aussie national team, and the New Zealand All Whites. And this next one is too absurd not to mention, but for some reason, the inauguration of now former Philippines President Noynoy Aquino was broadcast in 3D. Another absurd thing I want to mention is that the 2012 Miss Universe and Miss USA pageants were broadcast in 3D on Xbox Live. And for the BBC's last 3 broadcasts, they aired a special 50th anniversary of Doctor Who titled The Day of the Doctor, where the titular Doctor Who goes on a merry stroll through the park. Before anybody asks, yes, I know his name is not Doctor Who, and I have never seen the episode. I have no idea what he does. Additionally, there were 2 channels dedicated to porn, those being Hustler HD 3D in Italy and Penthouse 3D HD in the US. Call 1-800-STEAMER. Stanley Steamer gets your home cleaner. As I mentioned earlier, 3D graphics, or visuals, began to lose their popularity quite rapidly around 2012 to 2013. In 2013, both ExtremeTech.com and ComputerWorld.com published articles dismissing 3D TVs as nothing more than a fad. The Extreme Tech article, which was written by Sebastian Anthony on January 9th, 2013, stated, at CES 2012, you couldn't move for 3D TVs, ugly polarizing spectacles, and because the viewer at home can't take part in the awesomeness that is 3D, those awful "it's so real, it's bursting out of the screen" posters at IFA, the big mid-year consumer electronics event in Berlin, it was clear that 3D TV was on its way out. Today at CES 2013, 3D TV is dead. Sure, there's still some 3D tech on display at CES if you look for it, but the emphasis now has shifted to high-resolution 4K displays, OLED, image quality, and smart functionality. In short, Sony, Samsung, LG, Toshiba, and Panasonic have now decided to focus on actually improving their television technology after 3 years of pushing and peddling 3D TVs that are virtually devoid of any actual technological innovation. This is rather refreshing. To the objective, cynical observer, 3D TV has always come across as a fad fabricated by TV makers and Hollywood to sell more TVs and Blu-ray discs, with box office takings and DVD sales flagging and LCD HD TVs reaching saturation point. TV makers and Hollywood, understandably, decided that something had to change. 3D was the perfect choice. It's incredibly low tech, but also a very strong differentiator. It took almost no effort on behalf of TV makers and production companies to make the jump to 3D, and yet consumers were focused to buy expensive brand new TVs to enjoy the new content. Or if you couldn't afford a 3D TV, you finally had a reason to go to the cinema.
That is the end of the quote.
DirecTV stopped broadcasting 3D programs in 2012, ESPN and BBC in 2013. Sky moved its 3D content to its on-demand service. Vizio ceased production of 3D TVs in 2014, and other 3D TV manufacturers soon followed. In January 2017, the last two major 3D TV producers, those being LG and Sony, announced that they had halted all 3D support. I bet you didn't know this. A 3D TV holds a world record, technically. The 2011 UEFA Champions League Finals game between Barcelona and Manchester was broadcast live in 3D in Trädgården in Gothenburg, Sweden. The game was shown on the largest LED 3D television as recognized by Guinness. The TV, made by Ukrainian company Ekta, measures 23 feet 3.92 inches or 7.11 meters. The screen's height and width is 20 feet 3.78 inches by 11 feet 5.13 inches or 6.192 by 3.483 meters, and this gives the TV screen an exact area of 232.1496625 square feet or 26.566736 square meters. Barcelona won the game 3-1, by the way. So, Britain lost to the Britain of the Spanish world. Okay, that's the end of the video. This is probably my longest video. It's definitely my longest script. 7 pages dedicated to 3D TVs. Yep, 7 pages is long for my scripts so far. I hope you enjoyed it. So, the next video is about the 3DO game console thingy. Happy New Year. See you in the next video.